Now, as you know, we have jury trials in the United States. I don't believe you have too many of those here in the Czech Republic. But the purpose of a jury trial is very, very important to us. We got the concept of a jury trial in the United States from the common law from what's now the United Kingdom, from England. Because they did that, and many of us that came over to form the colonies in the United States followed that law. So it's very important. The jury trial is so important to us that it's in our Constitution. We have a copy of the Constitution around here. It's in our Constitution that a person is entitled to a jury trial for criminal matters and also for civil matters. The Constitution, I think, says for anything over $40,000 or $20,000. So a very, very low threshold in today's dollars. And it is so important that we feel in the United States that the best people to decide the facts of the case are us, not
general surgeon, doctor, orthopedic surgeon, and hospital. Are you ready to proceed?
We are.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you will now be presented with a medical malpractice case. Proceed, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. On behalf of my client, Florence, and myself, thank you for the time that you will spend in hearing this case and coming to your decisions. I represent Florence, who alleges that her surgeons at this hospital were negligent when they failed to detect and to treat her medical condition called a compartment syndrome. In this opening statement, what I say is not evidence, but I offer it to you as a guide or a roadmap to help you follow what the evidence will be, what you will hear, and what you will see as evidence to help you reach your conclusions. And this is the evidence that I believe will prove Florence's claim against these defendants. Florence was a 75-year-old lady who was admitted to this hospital with pneumonia, a lung infection, and she needed a test called a CT scan of her lungs to help the doctors see what her lung condition was. During the CT test, a needle was inserted into her arm with a colored dye that was supposed to travel to her lungs and color the lungs for the pictures to be taken with the CT scan. However, when the needle was inserted into her left arm, the dye escaped out of the needle and spilled out under the skin of her left arm. And you will hear from Florence and from others, including the defendant, that Florence experienced serious swelling of her arm, in pain, the sensation of burning, numbness, tingling, and black and blue bruising down her arm after this happened, all the way from her arm to her hands to her fingers on the left side. The swelling eventually caused so much pressure in her forearm that blood did not circulate properly through her forearm, and you will hear that this caused the tissue in her arm to start to die, and that there is only one way to relieve this problem, and that was to do a serious surgery on her arm and hand. And that was to relieve the pressure of this condition called a compartment syndrome. When our defendant, the general surgeon here, saw Florence the next day, you will hear that, he will tell you that he noted her swelling, pain, bruising, and other complaints. But he did not diagnose, he will admit, he did not diagnose compartment syndrome at that time, and he did not consider surgery at that time. Instead, he chose and wanted to monitor her condition. So our expert will tell you that this choice, these decisions were negligent and unreasonable and failed to meet the standard of care of general surgery. The day after Florence had this condition start and was seen by the general surgeon, a second surgeon saw her, and this was a hand surgeon. And the hand surgeon noted the increased pain and swelling, and although you will hear that the hand surgeon considered whether compartment syndrome may be developing, this hand surgeon did not act either. And it is our position that this was also negligent. And because they did not act within that 24-hour period, and Florence continued in her suffering, a third surgeon saw Florence and then proceeded to do the surgery that was needed to relieve the pressure in her arm and save the tissue in her forearm. That surgery, you will see, left her with terrible scarring, permanent muscle damage, and Florence herself will tell you that she developed what is considered a medical condition called permanent pain syndrome as a result of this condition, and how much she is unable to do now with her left arm, and how that has affected her in all aspects of her life. At the end of this case, I will ask you, the jury, to compensate Florence by making an award in favor of Florence and against the general surgeon for her current condition, her prior experience in pain and suffering, and what she will experience into the future. Thank you all.
May it please the court.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I represent the general surgeon, who is Dr. Schmall. Dr. Schmall is accused of failing to diagnose in a timely fashion Florence's compartment syndrome. He denies that he was negligent. You are here today to help us resolve this conflict. And to do so, you must look at the medical records and the documents that are presented to you. You must listen to and observe the witnesses and form your own judgment as to their credibility. And you must listen to the judge and follow the law that the judge will give you. The evidence is going to show that when the general surgeon, Dr. Schmall, did see Florence, she in fact had significant swelling, terrible pain. She had bruising. She had numbness and tingling in her hand and fingers. You will hear that he took a history, and he obtained the history from her that when she had her needle stick for her CT scan, the needle stick was kind of a jab, and there was contrast dye, this caustic or toxic substance that spilled onto and underneath her skin. He will tell you that everything that she saw, everything that he saw, is consistent with compartment syndrome, with the exception of one classic feature of compartment syndrome. And that is when he palpated her muscles, they were soft. They were compressible. Had Florence had compartment syndrome at that time, those muscles would have been hard, like a rock. And yes, then surgery would have been needed. Compartment syndrome causes pressure over time. And that is why, although he did not pull the trigger to have surgery, he wanted to monitor Florence's arm. You will hear that in his judgment, at the time that he saw Florence, he thought that the bruising and the swelling and the pain, the redness and the look of the arm that she had was consistent with toxic dye spilling onto and underneath her skin. You will hear three other important pieces of evidence. Number one, from the defendant orthopedic surgeon who saw Florence the next day. She's a hand surgeon and a specialist in hand and arm. She did not find compartment syndrome because Florence pressures, her muscles were soft. The second thing that you're going to hear in this trial is from the independent surgeon who did the surgery on her arm. And he's going to tell you that he found, when he opened her up, a huge collection of blood in her arm. Huge collection of blood. Very atypical in compartment syndrome cases. And number two, that when he looked at the muscles, they were pink. They were not dead. So compartment syndrome, if it existed, was in its infancy or its early stages. And the third bit of evidence that you're going to hear about this case is from Florence herself, and that is that 2 years before this surgery, she fell on her left arm and wrist, broke her wrist, had pins in her hands and wrists, and decided to pull some of her pins out, and had pain in the left arm and hand ever since then. And then you're going to hear that after her surgery, she fell again on her left arm and had exquisite pain after that fall. So the evidence that you're going to hear is going to suggest that there's no way that you can determine that the pain she claims right now is a result of her compartment syndrome. You're going to hear from my client that he is a surgeon of many years, that he's very experienced, compassionate, and acted reasonably. At the end of this case, I will ask that you find him not guilty.
Rita, do you want to call your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor, I call my client Florence and request Your Honor to hear her.
Would you raise your right arm? Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? You may be seated.
And Florence, speak loudly so that everyone throughout the whole room can hear you. What's your name, please?
Florence,
And where do you live?
in Chicago.
And how old are you, Florence?
I'm 75 years old.
Now, Florence, you were admitted to the hospital here in February of 2011, weren't you?
Yes.
And why were you admitted into the hospital?
Well, I couldn't breathe. They diagnosed that I had pneumonia, and they needed to do a CT scan to help treat me.
Okay. And you had that CT scan test done, didn't you?
Yes, CT of my
Okay.
house.
What happened after that CT scan test was done?
Nothing. Nobody did anything. My arm was starting to swell. I was howling in pain, and nobody did anything.
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled. This is her observation, not her opinion, and is relevant to the case. The jury will decide the issue of fact.
Thank you.
You were eventually diagnosed with compartment syndrome, were you not?
Yes.
Okay. And when you were diagnosed with compartment syndrome, what did you understand from the general surgeon who made the diagnosis?
That all the swelling in my left arm, it was causing pressure and injury to my muscle, and that it was a very good thing that he caught it when he did.
And what do you remember happening after you had surgery on your arm for the compartment syndrome?
I had constant pain. It was burning, swelling. The pain was unbearable.
And I'm going to show you what has been marked as plaintiff's exhibit number 1 for identification. Can you look at this, please, Florence, and tell us, do you recognize what it shows?
Yes,
Okay.
this is,
Go ahead and tell us what those two sides of exhibit 1 show.
well, I was very swollen in my arm. I couldn't really even bend my fingers, very swollen. And that's the scar from the surgery, which healed very poorly.
And do these pictures accurately show what you looked like shortly after your surgery?
Oh, yes, very accurate.
Your Honor, I move exhibit number 1 for identification into evidence, please.
Admitted.
And these will now be available for the jurors to look at. All right, now, can you please show us what your arm looks like today?
Right here, I still have swelling and I have
If
a
you can
scar.
stand up.
I have swelling and I have a scar from my elbow all the way through my arm,
Okay,
and
thank
through
you.
my hand.
You can sit down again. And do you or do you not have pain now today as a result?
I have constant pain.
And can you tell us what that's like?
With constant pain, it's a burning pain. I'll get electric shock throughout, through the hand. And it's still swollen. It's just constant aching.
And since your diagnosis of the compartment syndrome and the surgery for it, can you describe what your activities have been like, and if at all, have they change?
Well, as you can see, I really can't hold anything with that hand. I can't button or tie my shoes. I used to cook. I love to cook. I can't really cook anymore. I can't really tidy up the house. I can go out with my friends, but I really can't have fun. It's constant. I can't bowl. I'm constantly in pain. It's always hurting me.
And as a consequence, how does that make you feel about your life in general, Florence?
Well, I'm very sad. It's really limited my life, and really what I can do now and what I will be able to do, and I know it's not going to get any better. Yeah, I'm very sad about it, and I do struggle with depression because of it.
Thank you, Florence, I appreciate it. Your Honor, I tender the witness.
Okay, you have cross-examination,
I
counsel?
do, Your Honor. Ms. Florence, isn't it true that you don't remember the general surgeon who treated you at all?
Yes,
And isn't it true that you don't remember what the specialist hand surgeon told you the following day about her findings?
yes,
Isn't it true that the surgeon who performed your surgery told you that the surgery itself could cause significant pain for a long time?
yes,
And isn't it true that 2 years before this incident, you fell, broke your wrist, and had pins placed in your wrist and your fingers?
yes.
And
It's
you
2 years,
pulled,
mine.
and you pulled out some of those pins, didn't you?
Yes,
And isn't it true that you've had pain in your left arm and your left hand ever since that injury?
yes, but not the same.
Okay. Isn't it true that after your compartment syndrome surgery, you again fell on your left forearm and wrist, and you told your doctors then that it made your pain even worse?
Yes, but
And, Ms. Florence, isn't it true that after you were diagnosed with the pain syndrome that you have, you were offered by a specialist a nerve block treatment to treat your pain, but you refused that treatment, correct?
yes, I won't let them put any more needles in me.
I have no further questions.
Okay, counsel, do you have more witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor, I have one more redirect. I now call our plaintiff medical expert, please, Dr. Barbara.
Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
You may be seated.
Doctor, can you please tell the jury your name?
Richard Vavra.
And what is your specialty, please, doctor?
I am you hand me my papers? I'll tell you exactly what I am in a second. I am a orthopedic surgeon, which means I perform surgery on bones and joints in the body.
And doctor, how long have you been practicing the specialty of orthopedic surgery?
Over 45 years.
Do you continue to practice full-time as an orthopedic surgeon even up until today?
Yes, I do.
And are you familiar with the condition of compartment syndrome?
Yes, I am.
Have you ever performed surgery for compartment syndrome during your career?
I have.
And have you ever acted as an expert witness in cases before this one?
Yes, I have.
Have I retained you on behalf of our plaintiff Florence to review records and to come to medical conclusions with respect to the care that Florence received from the defendants here?
Yes, you did.
And how much are you charging for that service, please?
I'm charging $5,000.
Okay. After your review of all the materials, did you formulate an opinion as to within a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to whether the general surgeon defendant here and the orthopedic surgeon defendant were negligent or deviated from the standard of care that they owed to Florence.
Yes, I did render an opinion.
And what is that opinion?
I believe they failed to diagnose compartment syndrome in Florence on a timely basis and failed to perform a required surgery.
On what do you base your opinion that the defendants failed to diagnose compartment syndrome?
Florence clearly had the compartment syndrome when the orthopedic surgeon who performed the surgery took her to surgery. As such, she must have had it 24 hours earlier when the general surgeon saw her, and must have been present the following day when the hand surgeon defendant saw her.
Do you believe that at the time that our defendant, the general surgeon, saw our plaintiff Florence and this hand specialist saw Florence, that she had compartment syndrome, which was the cause of the pain and swelling, numbness, tingling, and bruising that Florence experienced?
Well, yes, the pressure must have been present at the time. Her muscles, therefore, more likely than not, had been hard. She required surgery on those at those times, because otherwise she would not have had such problems afterward.
In your opinion, doctor, within a reasonable degree of medical certainty, what caused the compartment syndrome that Florence suffered from?
Well, I believe that the needle stick, the dye found its way or tunneled into muscles. Because it was toxic, it caused burns within her muscles.
Do you have an opinion within a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to whether the surgery that she had for compartment syndrome and the resulting scar and the pain syndrome and continuing suffering that Florence experiences today was caused by the doctor's negligence?
Yes, it definitely was.
Okay, and what is your opinion?
That it was the cause of her pain and scarring and swelling was the inappropriate preparation for the CT scan, and therefore misdiagnosis that she was fine after the CT scan.
Thank you, doctor. I tend to go with you.
Counsel, do you want to cross-examine?
I sure do. Doctor, you're not a hand specialist, are you?
No, I'm not.
You're not even a general surgeon, are you?
No, I'm not.
And you feel
Field surgeon.
comfortable testifying against a general surgeon, don't you?
I'm sorry?
You feel comfortable testifying against a
I
general
do.
surgeon? Now, you said you've been practicing for 45 years, but isn't it true that in the last 5 years, you don't see any complicated orthopedic surgeries, correct?
I've done 2 or 3 of these type of surgeries in my career. In the last 5 years, I've pretty much have limited my practice to expert testimony.
Okay. Now, you did say that you have operated on patients with compartment syndrome before, correct?
I have.
But that's only 2 to 3 times in your 45-year career, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, the last time you operated on a patient with compartment syndrome was over 20 years ago, correct?
It's been a long time, yes.
Okay. Isn't it true that as an expert witness, you have reviewed over 500 cases across the entirety of the USA?
I think it's actually closer to 600.
And isn't it true that you have testified, as you are doing today, on the witness stand as a medical expert in over 200 times?
That's right.
In fact, doctor, isn't it true that you received a censure by a prestigious American Orthopedic Foundation and Association because it disagreed with some of the testimony that you have given, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, as to relevance as to this particular case, it's a prejudicial question and inflammatory. I ask that the question be stricken and that the jury be instructed not to consider this as part of their deliberations.
Your objection will be overruled. This is relevant to the witness's credibility.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Isn't that true, doctor?
Yes, it is.
Isn't it true that while today you told us that you thought that the dye kind of wound its way or tunneled into the muscles to create a compartment, when you gave a deposition 2 to 3 years ago, you told us that you thought it was directly injected into the muscles, correct?
I don't recall the testimony.
And isn't it true, doctor, that a patient who does not have compartment syndrome will have soft muscles?
That is correct.
And isn't it true that even if Florence was diagnosed with compartment syndrome 2 or 1 day before, she still would have had a significant scar and pain after surgery?
That's correct.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Plaintiff rests her case, Your Honor.
Thank you. Does the defense have any witnesses?
Yes, it does. The defendant calls Dr. Schmall.
Can we take a short break before Dr. Schmall goes on the stand?
Okay. I am.
We're running out of time.
I know, I understand. The defendant calls Dr. General Surgeon.
You promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated.
State your name.
My name is Philip Schmall.
Okay. And what is your occupation or profession, Dr. Schmall?
I'm a general surgeon.
Tell us what general surgery is.
General surgery is a field of medicine where surgeons like myself operate mainly in the abdomen on issues related to the gallbladder, appendix, and hernia repairs.
Tell us about your medical education.
I went to Harvard University where I studied for 4 years in medicine.
Okay. Tell us about your training after you went to Harvard.
After I went to Harvard, I spent 5 years at New York City in the Flower Fifth Avenue Hospital.
And do you have specialized training?
I did. I came to Chicago. I went to Northwestern University. I studied in histology and translated a book from German into English on histology.
Doctor, what is compartment syndrome?
Compartment syndrome is a constellation of symptoms caused over time when pressure in a compartment of the muscle or in the arm or the leg causes a restriction of the blood flow to the muscle.
So I'm showing the jury what the defense has marked as defense exhibit number 30, and you will see this a top section of the arm, which is a normal compartment. And doctor, isn't it true that the lower section represents what the inside of the arm would look like with a significant compartment syndrome?
That is correct.
What are the signs and symptoms of compartment syndrome?
Well, usually it's associated with pain, swelling, inability to move the extremity, and sometimes bruising, numbness, and tingling, and classically hard muscles when you push them.
Do you operate on patients who have compartment syndrome?
No, I called her. She complained of right arm swelling and pain after a needle dive on her arm.
What were her signs and symptoms when you saw her that day?
She had significant swelling, arm pain, black and blue marks on her arm, and some numbness and tingling. When I asked her to move her arms and her fingers, she could. And I felt her forearm, when I palpated it, it was soft but tender.
And do you believe that Florence had compartment syndrome when you saw her?
No, I do not, because her muscles were soft.
Referring to exhibit number 52, is this, doctor, your note in which you indicated no compartment syndrome?
That is correct.
What did you formulate in terms of an opinion as to what was causing her signs and symptoms?
May I refer to my notes?
Please.
I thought at the time that the dye that leaked on her skin was causing her skin to burn. The dye is very caustic or harsh, like a chemical that burns skin. They can cause pain and swelling, but I thought the bruising was caused by the needle that came out of her arm, because she was obviously had bleeding under the skin and was black and blue. I thought that the numbness and tingling was caused by the swelling in her arm.
Doctor, tell us, as a surgeon, what are the risks associated with opting for surgery in this case?
Well, Florence had pneumonia, and that put her at great risk for surgery. She was also elderly and had other health problems, making her a considerable risk for surgery. Finally, the surgery would leave a disfiguring scar, and no one should operate unless it is obvious that the compartmental syndrome does exist.
Now, the plaintiff is alleging that you did nothing, doctor. Did you, in fact, have a treatment plan?
I did. and carried it out.
And what was that?
I asked that the nurses elevate her arm and check on the arm every 2 hours, and to call me if there was any change, and that she should get pain medicine.
What do you understand, doctor, happened after your treatment or after you saw Florence?
Well, overnight, her pain and swelling improved with the elevation and arm and the medicine. However, the next day, she felt worse, and the hand specialist was called in to evaluate her.
Did the specialist who specializes in hand and arm surgery diagnose compartment syndrome?
No, that doctor did not.
And I'm showing you what is marked as defense exhibit number 59. Doctor, is this, oh shoot, sorry. Wrong thing. Is this the note of that hand surgeon which indicated that there is no compartment syndrome because the compartments are compressible?
That is correct.
What did you understand about the surgery that Florence had?
She had surgery 4 hours later, and the surgeon found a huge collection of blood underneath her skin from a bleeding vein. Florence had no muscle damage, and the surgeon stated that the compartment syndrome was in its early stages.
Again, showing you exhibit number 57, is this the operative note of that surgeon who noted that there was a significant hematoma under the skin?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Doctor, what was, in your opinion, the likely cause of the bleeding of the vein?
It was the needle stick.
And what was the likely cause of the pressure to her compartments and muscles?
Well, it was the collection of blood from the needle stick.
Do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to whether you acted as a reasonably well-qualified general surgeon in your care and treatment of Florence?
Yes.
Do you have an opinion that you complied with the standard of care?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Cross-examination?
Thank you, sir. Doctor, you aren't an orthopedic surgeon, are you?
No.
You're not specialized in hand surgery, are you?
No, I'm not.
You don't operate on the hand, do you?
I do not.
You've had some experience with compartment syndrome, but you agree most of your experience is in the leg and not the arm, correct?
That's true.
Now, pain is consistent with compartment syndrome, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Bruising of the extremity is consistent with the compartment syndrome.
Yes,
Swelling is consistent with compartment syndrome.
it is.
And numbness, tingling, consistent with compartment syndrome.
Yes,
Sensation of burning, consistent with compartment syndrome.
it can be.
Florence had all of those symptoms, didn't she?
She did.
Isn't it true that when you saw Florence, you didn't diagnose compartment syndrome?
That's correct.
You considered it as a possible cause, but you determined that you didn't make a diagnosis at that time, did you?
I did not.
Okay, and other than asking the nurses to have her arm elevated and to give her pain medication, you did not call in a specialist or a hand surgeon at that time, did you?
I called in a hand specialist.
But I'm talking about the first 24 hours. You didn't call in a specialist at that time, did you?
No, I did not.
Okay. And isn't it true that at that time, when you first saw her, 24 hours before the actual surgery, that you didn't think surgery was warranted, did you?
I did not.
Okay. And isn't it true that her pain progressed into the next morning? And eventually that day, she finally had surgery for compartment syndrome that you didn't think was necessary earlier. Isn't that true?
That's correct.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. You can step down. Your Honor, we have one more witness.
Okay.
The defense calls Dr. Payne, manager.
This should be interesting. You promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Nothing but the truth. Yes.
Sit down.
Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury your name
Dr. P. Manager. The P is for pain.
and what is a pain manager?
A pain manager is an anesthesiologist by training who specializes in the treatment of patients with severe or chronic pain, usually with medicine or procedures to reduce the pain.
And have you acted as an expert witness before, doctor?
Yes, I review about 4 or 5 cases a year, and that's over the last 12 years.
Now, did I retain you to review many medical records pertaining to Florence?
Yes, you did.
And that was records before and after her 2011 surgery?
That is
correct?
correct, yes.
How much are you charging me for your time?
$500 an hour.
After your review of the records, doctor, what did you learn about Florence's past medical history?
Well, I learned that for years Florence suffered from back, arm, and leg arthritis and chronic pain, and there was swelling in her legs and ankles. I also learned that 2 years before the time in question, she fell and broke her left arm and wrist and needed surgery. She complained then of severe pain in her left arm and wrist, and ever since then.
What did you learn about her history after her compartment syndrome surgery?
Well, I did review her records, which showed that several weeks after the surgery, she fell again on her left arm, and she complained that it hurt for months afterwards. She also had continued treatment for her arthritis and chronic leg pain and swelling.
Doctor, after you reviewed the records, what was your opinions or your conclusions to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Well, I do believe that Florence is a patient who suffers from chronic pain from multiple sources, and has all of her adult life, actually. Today, she continues to suffer from chronic pain from her left arm, wrist, and her legs, from her leg swelling, her arthritis, yada yada. As such, it is now impossible to determine with any certainty, and any medical certainty, that the pain she sustains in her arm is from the incident in question.
Do you have an opinion, sir, that Florence developed a pain syndrome after this surgery?
She did, no question, but after several months it subsided to a chronic pain problem, and the same one that she had before the incident.
Do you believe to a reasonable degree of medical certainty that the pain that Florence continues to sustain is related to her surgery for the compartment syndrome?
No, it is impossible to say with any certainty.
Thank you, doctor.
Do you have any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor, I do. Now, you testified once or twice a year at trial, isn't that right, doctor?
Yes, once or twice a year at trial, but I've also given over 100 depositions.
And isn't it true that you charged the attorneys representing the defendant here over $20,000 for your review of records here?
Well, yes, but I reviewed every single record and deposition.
And isn't it true that you believe that Florence did develop a pain syndrome after the surgery?
Yes.
Okay. And isn't it true she still suffers from pain, which limits many, many functions in her life today?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ordinarily, we would give closing statements at this time.
Yes, because of time,
Am I dismissed?
counsel, you are excused.
Where are you?
So, what is your verdict?
Or maybe does the judge want to read the instructions?
Oh, do you
Yeah.
want to?
Okay, you